Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the November 23rd, 2021 meeting of the Dover School Committee. My name is Sarah Gutierrez-Dunn, and I call this meeting to order at 6:32 p.m. This open meeting is being conducted remotely, consistent with the Act extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency signed into law by Governor Baker on June 16th, 2021. Information on how to join remote school committee meetings and meeting agendas are posted on the Dover-Sherborne District website. Please note that this meeting is being recorded, and please be aware that anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording. First on our agenda this evening is community comments. And before I read the preamble, is there anyone present this evening who would like to make a community comment? All right, thank you. I see at least one hand, so let me read this required language here. Please remember that community comments are an opportunity for members of the school committee to listen to members of the community. It is not a forum for answering questions or engaging in a debate. We respectfully request that you please make your comments brief, no more than 3 minutes, and that you move the discussion forward by adding new information. Please try to avoid repeating points that have already been made. Once the public comment section of the meeting has been concluded, we will move on to other business, and unsolicited comments from the community will no longer be permitted. This is standard operating procedure in school committee meetings across our 3 school districts. Rob Andrews, I saw you had your hand up. Would you like to make a comment?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, this is actually not in my, this is my hat as a parent that I want to make this comment, not as my other role, which would probably not like my comment. So because it might be expensive. So I have been listening to a lot of parents in just kind of my social circle, and at some of the kind of my husband attended Deb's principal coffee the other day and was listening to some of the other parents' comments, and there have been a lot of discussion about mental health services and educational assistance in Chickering, and whether or not we have enough, and whether or not we feel like our staff is being pulled in too many directions. And I just want to say, as a parent, I've been completely satisfied and happy with the experience my children have had at Chickering, but want to make sure that that folks on the school committee know that I think that the parent community would be very supportive if the school board and the school felt we needed to have more folks attending to the mental health needs and and assisting our teachers, who are doing a really amazing job in such a really difficult circumstance. And so I just wanted to reiterate that I do think that there's parental support around that and community support around that. And then if I put my warrant hat on, I might disagree with that. But still, as philosophically and ethically and morally, I think it's the right thing to ask that question and to consider. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. Is there anyone else who'd like to make a community comment? I don't see any raised hands. So we will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the superintendent's report. Kathy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Beth, for putting up the PowerPoint. Okay, next slide, please. And of course, we always like to start with some pictures of what's happening at such a wonderful school. Every time I visit, I'm amazed, and in just listening to parent Rob Andrews talk about the support from parents. I've had opportunities to meet members of the community, and I think you can see it on the faces of your children and what is happening at your school. Next slide, please. I want to thank Beth for capturing these pictures for me. She had spent some time at Chickering this past week. These are classrooms in different settings. Next slide, please. So I want to, and I'm really looking forward to the day that I do not have to start a school committee meeting and review all of the metrics. Quite honestly, I just have to say, when I think back to last June, I think all of us thought we would be in a very different place. These are really challenging times. And I want to say, you're going to hear me talk a little bit more about the region, which obviously has a higher vaccination rate for its students, mainly because the students at our region, grades 6 through 12, had opportunities going back to last spring, which has now just become available for our younger students. So let me talk about where we're at. This does impact the whole district. So I think many of you are aware, or presented that at just about every meeting, that as of October 15th, the commissioner put forward schools that demonstrate a vaccination rate of 80% or more for all students and staff can submit an attestation form to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, testifying or attesting to the fact that we would be able to make a decision in our district on our own with our school boards if we chose to unmask. We submitted to DESE on October 20th, and we got final approval last Monday, November 15th. So what the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education is saying is really the ball was back in our court. Our court with our regional school board presently making a decision about the high school, and also our 3 school committees, if in fact they are going to make adjustments to their face covering policy, which was last reviewed in August of 2021, which called for masking of all our students, all our staff, all our visitors throughout all of the Dover-Sherborne schools. And also, I want people to know that if and when at the high school level first, we choose to unmask because it is safe to do so, unvaccinated students and or staff, and the reason you don't see staff there is presently I have 100 members of your staff at the high school who are vaccinated. So those students that are unvaccinated would still be required to wear their masks. And I want you to know there has been a local district, which has been for the month of November, they were given permission to unmask. Their school board chose to do that from, I believe, November 1st to the 16th. And I'm talking about the neighboring community of Hopkinton. And one of the takeaways in speaking with the superintendent there was that although they had in the 90s a vaccination rate, there were only about 60 members, both students and staff, that chose to unmask during this 3-week period that they were testing the waters, so to say. So again, it doesn't mean if we choose to unmask that everybody would immediately unmask. We have a lot of work ahead of us. Some of this work, and it gets a little confusing because the next bullet here you see is the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education have a mask mandate, which has been extended through January 15th, 2022. And that is for all schools that have not met that 80% rate of vaccinated students and staff. So presently in the district, the only school that would meet that qualification is our high school. And I'll show that data, which quite honestly is changing every day, at least each week. We did find that on I believe Wednesday, the 10th of November, the Dover and Sherborne had a joint meeting of their boards of health, and they agreed, depending on certain factors, and they'll be working with us on these factors, that we would be able to lift our indoor mask requirement under, again, certain circumstances. And we will continue, my last bullet here is we will continue to work with our local boards of health on safe unmasking. I believe at this time, and I know the agenda is not finalized, we have a joint meeting of all 3 committees on December 7th coming up, and the region also has a school committee meeting that evening. I believe there is talk that we will put this as an agenda item for both the region and the joint school committees. Next slide, please. So in looking at your vaccination rates, and again, I continue to update these, I'm surprised because I thought when we just recently added the 5 to 11-year-olds, you would have seen the 6th grade soaring with vaccinations. Because what happens in 6th grade is every day you have a new group of students, depending on birthdays, turning 12. Typically, that is the grade where they're turning 12. So we do see that increasing, not really fast. And one of the things we're hearing is there are some parents stating my child is so close to 12 years old, I'm possibly waiting because the dosage is different for an 11-year-old and a 12-year-old. And whether parents are conferring, I'm sure, with their pediatricians or their medical professionals in making those decisions. As you see, 7th grade is 84% fully vaccinated. and your 8th grade is up to 90% fully vaccinated. So when you put all those numbers together, you have a total with your staff and students of 68%, not reaching that 80% rate yet. And you can see that the 6th grade is the class that I know will continue to have students vaccinated as we go forward. Next slide, please. And this is your high school. So for your 9th grade, you've got 86% fully vaccinated, your 10th grade, 88%. Same for 11th grade, 88%, and your 12th grade just recently got up to 90%. Your senior class has 90% of your students fully vaccinated. And you also can see right there, some students are partially vaccinated at this time. So your percentage is pretty high at the high school. When you take your staff at 100% and your overall student at 88, it's 90% at your high school. So let's take a look at the next slide. It was pretty exciting to add this slide. We did not at this point break it down to grade levels, and I want to thank Jill Fedor and our entire nursing staff who were doing yeoman's work throughout this challenging time in our district. So we are a little bit over the past couple of weeks. 5 to 11-year-old age group are able to get the COVID-19 vaccine. So in that time, and again, this continually changes, at Chickering, out of out of the full population, 198 are partially vaccinated out of 486 at a 41% partially vaccinated. Quite honestly, I was looking at some data last night on one of our national news stations, and they were talking about those parents, and they were saying about 51% are starting to immediately get out and get their children vaccinated. Another group of parents are waiting, wait and see. And again, there are some that are concerned, but I just want to encourage all parents to work, like I said, with your pediatricians and your health professionals on making decisions about your children. So for Pine Hill, out of 408, you have 176 partially vaccinated, 43%. And again, both of them are partially vaccinated because this is a two-shot system with the Pfizer vaccine. So we're very pleased about that. But and let me go to the next slide, and I am going to go back and make a couple of comments. The other thing that has been talked about with the Commissioner of Education in looking to partner with the Mass Department of Public Health, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, in collaborating to provide mobile vaccine clinics to districts throughout the state. So I am very pleased to tell you that Nurse Supervisor Jill Fedor has been paired working with Fallon Ambulance Service for a mobile clinic for our students ages 5 and older. And we do have a tentative date right now to deliver a first dose to our students on Thursday, December 16th. The good news about this date is the second dose would be Thursday, January 6th, and that helps any of those families that are traveling. So during that time, before they leave for the holiday break, they would be able to get their first dosage and still hopefully be back in time. School opens up again, I believe, on Tuesday, the 3rd, I think it is. And they will be able to get that second dose. And we are proposing that the clinic be held in Linquist Commons, taking it out of our 2 elementary schools, putting it up at the region in a more general setting. So that being said, before I hand it over to Dr. Reineman, I do want to say that we are seeing this, and it is not just in Dover and Sherburne. We saw positive pool testing last week at our Pine Hill School in Sherburne, and we were able to immediately jump in and support those families, identify a positive case, making sure we were able to implement our test and stay program, work with our families of close contacts. And Chickering did not escape it. So this today was very challenging at Chickering. I want to thank Dr. Reineman, Assistant Principal Jim Kahns, Jill Fedor, Nurse Stephanie at Chickering, Kate McCarthy, who went over there. We're in contact all day because for the first time we had a number of positive pools in the school. And it spanned a number of grade levels. And what we were able to do, and I want to thank those parents, again, who signed up for the test and stay program, or to sign up their children to be part of the pool testing. This is when it works. It is a mitigation strategy. It allowed us to immediately jump in and identify in those pools which student or students were testing positive. We have spent, I know, all day contacting families, talking about what the next steps were going to be. Unfortunately for us, we have a very short week. So I say that, is it unfortunate or fortunate? So as far as test and stay, we're able to complete the process, I think, tomorrow with Pine Hill, with the number of days we had last week. This week, we're going to have such a short week because of the Thanksgiving break. So we're working very closely with families late into the evening right now. I know phone calls are being made. Families, again, have been receptive. I do want to make a couple of comments. And I want to say this again to all our staff and our families. If in fact, there are any kind of symptoms, cold symptoms, fever, chills, loss of appetite, loss of taste or smell, those are some of the things that we need to pay attention to and immediately reach out to your healthcare professionals, work with our school nurses so that we can keep our schools as safe as possible. So again, I want to thank everybody for the work that they're doing. It tells us that it's working. I don't think there is an opportune time for COVID. And it is telling us, and I want to share this with the community also, on a call with the commissioner yesterday, he was cautioning all superintendents and school leaders that in working with their health professionals, they look back to last year. And although this is a very different year, we have numbers of students, as you can see, numbers of staff, numbers of community members that are vaccinated, and that is helping us. But that being said, they're concerned as we start to meet with families and life is starting to get back to a place we weren't at last year. And that's a positive thing. But they're concerned during these 19 days between when we leave for Thanksgiving break and meet with our families and friends to celebrate and going into our holiday break in December, they're concerned about a spike. So we're going to be very vigilant. I'm going to ask you to do the same as a school community and the communities of Dover and Sherburne to just continue to deal with these challenges, work with each other respectfully and collaboratively. And I am very hopeful as we start to vaccinate more of our 5 to 11-year-olds, we're going to be in a better place. So let me stop there, school committee members. Any questions I can answer on what I've just put forward?
Kathy, let me say first, thank you for the update. And it's obviously very sobering news to learn of the positive pools at Chickering. It's all of our hope that all of the families involved stay healthy and safe, and that this causes minimal disruption for everyone. And a huge thank you to the team that you referenced, who's been working to notify the individuals involved. I see that Jeff has a hand raised. Jeff, do you have a question or a comment?
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks, Kathy. Just had a quick question on the partially vaccinated stats. Where are we collecting that from? Because I, as a personally as a parent, I haven't said that mine are partially vaccinated. I was waiting till the full cycle is done to tell the nurse. But is there a data collection that we should be submitting to?
First of all, Jeff, my understanding, it's a state data collection where that information is stored and it is shared with our medical professionals. So I don't have access to it, but our medical professionals, nurse supervisor Jill Fedor, and your nurses are getting that information from the state for those students that are, like we said, partially vaccinated at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Kathy, I'll jump in. It's all vaccinations now. So instead of you submitting the medical forms, it can upload into our health system. So it saves us a lot of admin time as well.
That's great. Are there other comments or questions from other committee members? The only other thing I'll add, Kathy, is that I look forward to the discussion regarding unmasking. I think we all yearn for more normalcy and look forward to safe unmasking. I'm grateful to the guidance from our boards of health who've been so instrumental at helping us to thread the needle to prioritize safe in-person instruction throughout all of the twists and turns that we've experienced during this pandemic. I was able to view their November 10th meeting, and I appreciate that they are endorsing an approach that looks not only at vaccination rates, but also disease prevalence within the community. And I will admit to some trepidation with the case numbers being on the rise and the holidays upcoming and the news that we're getting today from the pool tests, given that the earliest that any of our 5 to 11-year-olds would be fully vaccinated is mid-December. But I look forward to further discussion at our joint school committee meeting on December 7th.
And your boards of health and our health and hygiene advisory, I mean, they're unwavering to their commitment. They follow the science, they follow the data. This is not a survey we take in the community. This is going to be not only when it is right, and I agree, we're looking at, something that I think we were all hopeful would change. And I believe it will down the line, we'll see. But, they are going to stay the course with us. We have to be ready when and if we're ready at the high school. Principal John Smith is working with his staff on civility during this time, on understanding personal choices, working together. He is very confident that's what will happen, but we have to be ready to pivot. We just got word today from the Interscholastic Athletic Association, MIAA, that again, to start the winter season, which remember most of our sports go indoors at this time. We do have some outdoor sports, but we are going to be fully masked. So whether you're a basketball player, whether you're a fan, whether you're an official, and this I'm told also is being extended right through mid-January. So right now, that's a decision they have made, based on some of the things we talked about this evening.
All right. Anything else before we move on to the assistant superintendent's report from committee members? All right, Beth, want to take it away?
Thank you. I'm actually going to turn it over to Dr. Reineman, and then I'll close things out if that's okay.
Sounds great. Deb.
Great. Thanks, Beth. So before you start that, do you mind? Unshare for a moment.
Okay.
Yep. So that's sort of the wrap up on this. So I'll just start with that piece. In preparing for tonight's report, I noted I went back to a year ago, and it's shocking to think that we were thinking about trying to bring our kids in from 2 days to 4 days into school. It certainly was longer than a year ago, I'm sure of it. But it was exciting to think about and look at where we are now. Certainly the letters home today about pool testing were not any fun to send, or the phone calls that we made. But I have to give great thanks, like Kathy did, to the team that was here to help us. People jumped right in and were fabulous about making phone calls and helping out and gathering up kids and timing tests and the whole thing. And then all the parents that I talked to today. Lots of surprise, lots of shock, disappointment, but a lot of gracious thank yous and good questions. So the response from the community, while it wasn't the news anyone ever wants to get when I call, people were great about receiving that news. The timing is interesting. We have some students who will be test and stay, and the timing is that they can test and stay today and tomorrow. And then if we were in school, we would do Thursday, Friday, Monday, but we're not. And so with the negative test, actually some of those kiddos will be coming back Tuesday. So similar to our kindergarten COVID bubble, the timing worked out just by luck for us. So there we are. We are continuing in the midst of all of that with all of our work in intervention and academics. Our data teams met today. Students were assessed again and looking at what they need, what are their strengths. So WIN groups are being reshuffled and working across the grade levels. We're very excited about that work that our teachers are doing. There's lots of grateful things going on this week. Lots of grateful notes back and forth between classes. Some of our students contributed to the thank you notes for the Council on Aging meals that were delivered. And we actually got a number of Council on Aging folks who sent us thank you notes to share with the kids. So that was really special. That really encouraged them to want to send more. So I suspect we're getting some pen pal systems setting up, which is exciting. As I think Kathy mentioned, Rob mentioned, we had our principals chat last week. Jim and I hosted a sort of an office hour and it was lovely, although very lightly attended. So I don't know if that means the time was bad or people just didn't feel like they needed to talk to us. I don't know, but we'll do another one in an evening as we go through. I think we have a pretty good handle on what's going on. We had some good questions, as Rob mentioned, about SEL and staffing. So thank you for bringing that up. We're fully staffed here in a few weeks with our EAs. We're very excited to be able to give that report. So hooray. And PTO is doing some amazing things. So now I can go to my slide, Beth. Sorry. Thank you. So I took the pictures that Beth and Kathy had sent, and I flung them all at the front without giving Kathy and Beth warning that I had rearranged their PowerPoint. But I want to thank them for sharing those, because they share things showing our flexible seating and the kids in groups and doing all those things that we had hoped to do, but with masks. So we are underway. So I mentioned our WIN blocks, our Teachers College Readers Workshop. We are starting in many places Unit 2. And so our teachers are working with our coach, Priscilla Stefan, to prepare and get that rolling. Our PTO support has been amazing as usual. They are continuing with curriculum enrichment and have started their grant cycle with us. So they set aside some of their budget for teachers to apply for grants. So they get to put their own stamp on some of the things that they would like to do for the classroom. SEL, as we've noted, continues to be an area to work on. Things like taking turns, playing a game, lining up, a lot of things that we took care of last year. If you were 6 feet apart, standing in line, you didn't have to practice how to keep your hands to yourself because you couldn't reach. So we're doing things like that right now, but getting much better, getting in the routine of it, the rhythm of it. We're still looking for substitute teachers, as always. And if you've been following our newsletters, you'll notice that bus behaviors have been a challenge. So Mr. Carnes and I have been working closely with the drivers and the students and getting some of the settling worked out. A lot of it turns out to be real estate in terms of sharing seats and how to be a good seatmate. And if someone has to sit next to you, you have to slide over. So we're getting there, but it's much improved. So thank you to our parents and students for their support there. I don't know if you have any questions for my report.
Liz?
Thanks, Deb. That was really nice. The photos were great. It's good to hear the update. I just wanted to, again, thank you for the work with the pool testing. We've been having positive pools at my school for a while now, and I know how daunting it is to get through this day, but without the risk of sounding over the top, like you literally saved people's Thanksgivings. A lot of people could have gotten sick this week had that not happened. So thank you. Pat on the back for making it through this day.
Any other questions or comments from other committee members? Colleen?
Yeah, thank you again for the presentation. I was wondering how the teachers are faring. It's great to hear that the kids are, that some of the SEL things are falling into place as they get more structure and sort of routine and explicitly taught, retaught things that we thought they knew. And I appreciate the time that's being taken, the attention that's being taken for that, because that does seem to be what needs to happen. The structure and doing it with compassion for where they're coming from. How are the teachers feeling at this point? If there's a check-in that you could tell us about.
Sure. I think the day before Thanksgiving, we're probably exhausted, like the students are, right? We are finding a routine. The masks are exhausting to speak and teach through, even though we've been at it for several months. So there's that physical fatigue. I think a number of teachers are managing things outside of school, more so than before, COVID related and not. So there's a lot of stress that way. But I think now that the day has some rhythm to it, the week has some rhythm, the kids are falling into understanding the routines and their personalities are sparkling through more, even through the masks. So there's a lot more engagement and there's some fun. before I think everyone came on, I had my turkey jokes up because we're just full of turkey jokes this week as people get into the holiday season. So we are improving. We're still not exactly where we want to be, but I think that's probably true of everyone right now. But we're on our way. So thank you.
Thank you, Colleen, for asking that. And thank you, Deb, for addressing it. Obviously, you know, the state of affairs for teachers is something that concerns all of us. And I do want to put a placeholder on the issue that Rob Andrews had raised in the community comments for further discussion, perhaps during our budget discussion, just, you know, the question about the levels of staffing for the educational aides and also the level of social and emotional support that is required during this most unusual time.
Thank you.
But any other questions or comments for Deb from any committee members before we move on? All right, so I think, are we going to you now, Beth?
Yes, thank you.
Great.
All right, good evening, everyone. If I could just add to Deb's comment about the social emotional wellness of our teachers, they are definitely exhausted and very much looking forward to a rest over Thanksgiving. And as a reminder to you as parents and community members, on Monday, your kiddos will be home with you because our teachers will be at school engaging in some professional development. And the focus of the professional development that Monday is on the social emotional wellness of them as adults and self-care. So we're hoping to inspire them a little bit, love them a little bit, and then give them some time to do the many things that they have to do as educators. So just wanted to add that. Before I jump into my slides, I just wanted to rewind a little bit, thinking about teaching and learning and all of the wonderful examples Deb just gave about things happening in the classroom. If you think back to pre-pandemic, we had been working on challenge success, obviously, for years and years, saying that the definition of success is greater than standardized test scores. And we need to make sure that each child has a personalized pathway, you know, through our schools to wherever they want to land in life. The Portrait of a Graduate was reminding us that we need to work on skills by way of content, but we want to make sure that our students are prepared for not just something, but anything. And of course, most recently, our work around equity has reminded us that we want to make sure that all of that is possible for all of our students, regardless of who they are as individuals. So that said, at our last school committee meeting, Deb had shared our MCAS scores, which given the circumstances are solid. And tonight shared some great examples of the learning and the magic that's happening day to day. So I just kind of wanted to tie that together for all of you. And I will show you my slides. Oop, Deb, did you want to say anything here?
I certainly can, Beth, but I think you're on a roll with the data. So if there's anything to add, I'll jump in. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So as you know, MCAS are very public data, especially, you know, it's the only real public data we have at the elementary level. And then as the students get older, SATs, ACTs, AP data is made available. So I just wanted to stop and remind us that pre-pandemic, we started to question how we want to measure success as a district, what we think is important for our students, and measure that against some of the public information that's shared, just to put in some caveats that we need to be careful of what we are giving credence to. Boston Magazine, for example, in order to rank schools in the Boston area, use average class size, MCAS proficiency, SAT scores, no surprise there. I do want to point out the graduation rate factor, which since we've been working on challenge success and since we've been encouraging students to think creatively and thoughtfully about what they do after graduation, we have a number of students who are taking gap years to either travel, do community service, do an internship, and really think about how they want to spend those 4 years of college and tuition before they dive in. Unfortunately, that counts against us as not 100% of our students graduating within 4 years. So that affects our ranking. You'll also notice there educator evaluations. That's a new factor that Boston Magazine is using in the rankings. So just like our students in MCAS are put into 4 buckets, when we evaluate our educators, there are 4 buckets. And so now Boston Magazine is looking at school districts to see how many teachers are either proficient or exemplary, which we know with any rubric, not standardized, can be objective. And I just want to point out down below, you'll see Boston Magazine 2021. We had 85.4% of our teachers over on the right who were proficient, and 10.4% of our teachers were exemplary. That's 2018 data that they're now showing in 2021. So there's a lag in time. And I also wanted to show you that just in 1 year's time, we went from having 10.4 teachers exemplary to 18%. So as we continue to coach our teachers, support our teachers, recognize their hard work and efforts, that number goes up. So again, from year to year, this is going to change both for Dover-Sherburne and all of the districts that we're comparing ourselves to. US News and World Report is a national ranking. As you can see, they take great pride in making sure that students and seniors have access to rigorous college courses. So they're looking at students who have taken at least one AP course. Somehow they come up with an equation. They predict what we're going to get on MCAS and then compare that to what we actually get on MCAS, which I'm sure is a fascinating science to learn. They also look at our free and reduced lunch students and our BIPOC students to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all students, which of course we think is important, and hence our work with the equity audit. And again, they take into account students who graduate in 4 years. So as a district, we've really embraced our special education program, our mental health program, and are trying to keep our students in district with their peers, with their classmates, with their neighbors. In doing that, some students graduate high school in 5 years, some graduate in 6 years, and some students are going to stay with us till 22. So while we believe the best thing for our students with disabilities is to be with us, and the best thing for our students, our typical students, is to have them with us as well, this is counted against us. So again, we just need to be wary of how much credence we're giving to this report and what that says about us. That said, one other piece of data I would like to show is, again, at the bottom from Boston Magazine. You'll see that in 2019, we had 674 students at the high school, which was a student-to-teacher ratio of 11:6. Average class size 16.4 students. 91 is the percentage of students that were proficient or advanced on the MCAS. What I can't figure out is where that 91% came from. In 2021, 94% of our students were proficient or advanced in English MCAS. 2020, they didn't take the MCAS. 2019, we were 89%. So where that 91 came from, I'm not sure. And then the 92% MCAS proficiency in math is from 2021, and science is from 2019. So again, you can see that this is not a perfect science. So that said, we have so many amazing things happening in our district, as you see from the pictures and from Dr. Reinemann's report, and so many pieces of data that our data teams and our student support teams are using to support kids during wind block or during class. I would just encourage us as we move on post-pandemic and find some bandwidth again to think about all these factors and what we value as a district and how we want to measure success as a district, and really think about how do we get this information out to the community, whether it's frequent tweets to show the wonderful things happening in our classroom and our kids, whether it's an annual performance report that we publish to highlight the teaching and learning that's happening, the programs we're offering kids, the awards that they're getting. So just putting a pin in this because I'd like to revisit it at some point soon. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Beth? Well, thank you. Oh, Colleen, I see your hand.
It's not a question. It's just, it's a gratitude because I think that's really important for all of us to hear in Dover. We have a lot of high achieving families here, and just the reassurance that if that score has come down, and it has, it's for good reasons. They're reasons that will serve our students well, actually. Acknowledging, that kids need to be kids, and that's a really important part of their development. And so if we are doing what's developmentally appropriate for them, then that should be reassuring to our families. So thank you very much.
Any other committee members? Thank you. I appreciate the presentation, Beth, and I'll take one of everything on that slide that you put together of how to define success. So that's all really meaningful measures, and we need to focus holistically on the student experience and achievement. So next, I believe we have the warrant report. Dawn?
Yeah, so in your packet are the warrants approved or processed through the month of, today's date. I think one thing just for new members too, it gives you an idea of where the money is spent. So it puts some perspective around what's coming out of the operating fund versus what's coming out of some of the grants that we'll talk about during the budget season. So I think that's good information that if you have any questions, Mark is your signer, and but we always have copies here if you have any interest in seeing sort of what makes up those individual warrants. And should we just keep going, Sarah?
Yes, please.
Okay, so you have your monthly financials as of October 31st. As I've been doing in previous years, I'm keeping the narrative running so that you can keep track of what we've already discussed and then put in bold any new information. So there's just a little bit of bold this month. One I will note is that we did incur another line item that went a little bit over budget, and that is just because during the hybrid and remote, we started using additional sort of online curriculums because it was easily accessible from anywhere. So we're continuing. What we found is that's been pretty successful and actually very worthwhile even when we're in school. So we've been renewing some of those more than we thought we would be. So that's why you see that line item slightly over budget, and knowing that we've taken that into consideration for the fiscal year 23 budget. So we did increase for that. The other new piece of information is that since we last met, we did get your final circuit breaker numbers. And in your report sort of details the total. Just for a little bit of a educational little caveat on circuit breaker. So the circuit breaker that we're receiving this year is based on your added district and special education costs from last year. So it's a year lag in reimbursement, but it's based on the experience that we had last year. And the new piece this year is that we're actually starting to receive some reimbursement on the special education out of district transportation. It's going to be phased in over 4 years. And so this first year, 25% of eligible transportation costs were reimbursed at 75%. And so I broke out for you how much that equaled for Dover. And keep in mind also for some of the newer members, your budget carries all of our out of district expenses or placements for any Dover resident age 3 to 22. And that's when you'll realize when we start talking about the budget, we're pretty distinct in breaking out the Chickering budget and the out of district budget, because it's almost like really two distinct operations. So I think that's something that is the citizens don't necessarily always understand. So that we do make that that distinguishment, and the circuit breaker then is based on 3 through 22. You'll also note that I said we have a little bit of circuit breaker for in-district. So as you know, we're keeping more and more students in district. In-district students can also reach that threshold, and we can get some circuit breaker reimbursement on students in district. So that's fairly new for us, that we're crossing the threshold based on just sort of the types of students that we are able to keep in district now. So I think it's important for you to see that it's coming from three different areas this year for circuit breaker. And then again, just your ESSER grants are listed in there, and the amount, we're still waiting approval. There are so many new grants, and that DESE and the grants support staff are just a little overwhelmed. And so some of them are taking a little bit longer to be approved, but it's not holding us up for any operations right now. So we're just letting that run its course. Any questions on the monthly report? Perfect. It looks like the next item on your agenda is just the annual approval of the PreK tuition. And so we're only recommending a 1% increase in the tuition rates for next year. If you remember, I think it was last year, we streamlined that we just have the 3-day and the 5-day programming for our general ed kids who join in our preschool integrated program. And we made sure we looked at sort of the area public integrated preschool. So Westwood, Medfield, to see that we were in line. You only have one preschool class at Chickering. And so you probably only ever have anywhere from maybe 6 to 8 students who pay tuition because they're there to be peers for those students who come to us for their special education needs. So that's sort of how, so it's not a lot of people that pay this tuition. So with everything that's been going on, we felt 1% was appropriate increase for fiscal year 23. And we're asking for the approval now because actually the application packets are ready to be posted tomorrow with the new rates included.
All right, are there questions for Dawn regarding the pre-K tuition rates? Is there a motion to approve the pre-K tuition rates for fiscal year 2023 as presented this evening?
Colleen Burt, so moved.
Second?
Liz Grossman, second.
Any discussion? All right, now that we're back to Zoom, we'll have to take a roll call vote. So Colleen?
Colleen Burt, yes.
Jeff?
Jeff Cassidy, yes.
Liz?
Liz Grossman, yes.
Mark?
Mark Healy, yes.
And Sarah Gutierrez Dunn, yes.
Great, thank you.
All right, so John, we're still with you with the
with the budget.
budget.
So hopefully everyone found their budget books outside their front doors on Friday. Luckily, there was no rainstorms as we had the previous week with Sherburne. So I want to just sort of put a caveat because I know it can be overwhelming to get that book and have so many numbers thrown at you. But really, this is just your first draft. This is just to get the process started and to also meet the date requirement of warrant, which is requested a first version of all department budgets of the town by December 10th. And so this is our starting point. We'll have multiple times to continue to discuss this. And obviously, as between now and March, we will obtain additional information that will incorporate into the budget. So when you meet in January, when you meet in March, we'll probably be bringing forward budget adjustments going both ways, depending on the additional information that we're able to bring forward to the committee. So that's just so don't get overwhelmed. This is just our starting point. What we hope that you do is just take the information, take some time to spend with it, synthesize it, and then any questions you have, you can send to your chair. Then we'll be prepared to answer some of those questions when you meet in January. So, don't think you have to ask all your questions tonight too. I think we're just sort of trying to start the process and give you a good foundation to start reviewing. So just a quick overview in your budget book. So you have an overall memo that just gives you sort of a high level look at the budget for right now. You also have in that first tab the budget guidance from the Town of Dover's Warrant Committee. Then you have detailed line by line, which you don't see that very often. During the budget's the one time that you can see what makes up all the individual lines that we report on our monthly financial statement. So it gives you a little more insight as to what's in those line items. And where there's new information, we try to add notes on the side to give you a little more perspective on what's going on. You also have a pretty good summary of the staffing by category, just to give you a feel of the teachers, how many educational assistants we have, what makes up building administration, your custodial staff. So you're seeing all employees in that staffing summary. And then we also provided additional supplemental information on some of the additional staffing that we're bringing forward. One, to give you a little perspective on some of it is staff that we've added post-budget because of our needs. And so let me put that in perspective for you too. When you read through the warrant committee's guidance, they use a term called level service. So they want us to prepare a budget that keeps us at level service versus another word you could say is level funding. So take your budget and you have to do the same amount of services with that same budget. Town of Dover allows us to increase our budget if that is because we are providing level service. So obviously, to meet your class size policy, post-budget fiscal year 22, we had to add 2 classrooms. So that would be considered what additional expenses that we need to do to keep level service. And so the EA, that's a part of that equation, is a level service. So what we'll do when we do more of our public presentation for the budget is break that level service out for apart from the new things that we are asking for. And that's where they look at, that does scrutinize that a little bit more because that's new, not level service. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. But we try to give you as much information about the positions that we are adding in the fiscal year 23 budget. In your budget or in your book for enrollment right now, it's the October 1st enrollment. We will do our projections and present those to you in January. We just needed a little more time to get that finalized, and we didn't want to rush it out. So I don't think that's going to have a huge impact on your budget. You can look at the current grade levels right now and realize that we have a large 5th grade class with 5 sections that will be graduating and coming to the middle school. But at the same time, we had a pretty large kindergarten class, and that's where a lot of times we also see a higher percentage of in-migration for 1st grade. So what we anticipate is that we probably have the right number of teachers. We just don't know what grade levels those teachers are going to be in. So that's where our projections will come in handy for us, but we'll probably see some changing in number of sections per grade. But as you can see, you've got class sizes or grade levels anywhere from 68 to 90. So that's a pretty big difference, which does cause that fluctuation from year to year and how many sections we have. So just keep that in mind, that comes into play for a number of sections. In January 2, we will have a better analysis of your out of district. Given where we've come from too with the COVID and you can see how our in-district students have been sort of dealing with things. Our out-of-district students are doing the same thing. And I think this is the first time that it's been this late in the school year where we really don't have all of our students settled in a placement. So it didn't make sense to try to project what the fiscal year 23 numbers were going to look like when we have several placements still in flux. So we'll have much better data for you in January. The positive thing is that I see where we've had the last 2 years unexpected placements, and it's caused you to have a negative operating variance. We look like we're going to stay within the same operating budget at this point. It just may look a little different with the placements, but I don't feel we're going to be in a situation where we'll be asking for more than what's currently in the budget, which is why we felt comfortable just bringing forward the fiscal year 22 out of district budget into your fiscal year 23. But we'll have a nice chart for you that shows you the roll forward in January. And then in your budget book, you do have your capital plan that you already approved in October, but it's there for when we do updates. At least you have a section in your book. So I would encourage you just spend a little time with the budget book. As our meetings go on, any additional attachments that I will be providing will give to you so you can add to your book. And it's a really good tool, I think, to keep all year long if you need to refer back when we actually get to go to 23. And so hopefully use that as a resource as you go forward. Just looking at our overall and where we stand right now. If you look at the summary that's in tab 1, it sort of takes it high level. And I just want to point out where this is where we start looking at our in-district. So of your total budget, your in-district's about 72% and your out-of-district's about 28%. So we really look at these as two separate pieces. So looking at the in-district, we do have a pretty significant increase of 6.62%. That is higher than we've had in the last couple of years. And just to give you some perspective, in fiscal year 21, we actually had a 0.02% increase in district. And last year we had a 1.59%. Some of that is that if we're not adding staff and we're realizing some retirements, that has a huge impact on our in-district budget. This particular year, we are adding quite a few staff and some additional positions. So that plays into the salary increase. Other than that, across our other operating line items, we stay relatively flat. I highlighted some of the increases in the non-salary is the software that I mentioned, and an increase in bus transportation. So there's obviously every year there's an automatic increase in our bus contract. And the other thing that we've increased it for this year, if you've been looking at gas prices, our gas fuel adjustment is kicking in. I haven't seen that in a while, but we actually got our first bill from Conley because the gas prices is outside of the band that sits in our contract. And so they are able to charge us additional funds for the increase in the gas price. So not knowing where that's going to go, we did increase that a little bit because over the last 5-6 years, we used to have a more hefty fuel adjustment reserve, and we were able to whittle it down. Well, now we're sort of going to whittle it up just a little bit, but hopefully we'll see if it's short term. But that plays into some of the regular education transportation increases. Let's see, what else did I want to say? Then I think just looking, I sort of broke out between level service and new. So if you'll using that term as you read about who we're adding and what we're doing, I think that'll be good for you to know what's level service. We're doing it, we're adding it because our enrollment's up. We needed additional educational assistance to support that kindergarten class. And then the new things are like the math specialist that we've added, the corresponding EA to help the interventionist. Other than that, most of the staff we added at this point in time are because we needed to based on the cohort of students at Chickering. So hopefully I didn't overwhelm everyone, and I'm happy to answer any preliminary questions. Also on your memo is the timeline. So you have another meeting on January 18th, which will obviously be bringing your enrollment projections and your out-of-district projections. We then meet, it's typically administration, Kathy and myself, and then the chair from Dover School Committee with the warrant committee. That's an opportunity for a warrant committee to ask all the questions they may have. It's the full warrant committee. And then we'll conclude the budget season on March 10th when you do your public hearing for the community. And at that point in time, you will approve your final budget to then continue on through the town process. And we will ask you to take a vote tonight on this preliminary budget so that we can submit it to the town.
Thank you, Dawn. So much material here, so helpful to see it spelled out in such detail. Do committee members have questions or comments for Dawn? Jeff?
Thank you, Dawn. I appreciate all the detailed information here. So I had a couple of high-level questions and then maybe a lot more detailed questions that I don't know if this is the right forum or it's better to send in a separate sheet for questions. But I guess my high level question is, just as the new person, what goes into the out of district spend? That number in general just seems like a lot. This is a new number to me. I'm just trying to understand what's the makeup of that.
Right. So that's individual students who are residents of Dover from the ages of 3 to 22 that we cannot accommodate their educational needs in our district. So we send them out of our district to private schools, other public school settings. We have, some students that go to some in-house special ed programs over in Wellesley. In that number. And so when I give you, Jeff, the summary of the projection for fiscal year 23, I'll actually have in there the categories of the different out-of-district schools. So we have residential students. So you may have residential students who actually live at a placement. Those are usually around $300,000. So now you can easily see how the number can build to the 3 million. An average placement for just a regular out-of-district program is probably 50 to 60,000. And then it varies all the way through. But I will show you that there are some students that go to collaborative programs, which are collaboratives are programs that are actually district members come together and sort of pool their resources to build special education programs. So Dover and Sherburne belong to two collaboratives. One is the Educational Cooperative, and the other one is the Accept Collaborative, and we send students to both those programs. Those typically are lower cost programs for us to send students to, similar to the other mass public schools. But then we also send students to private placements. If you've heard the School of Landmark, schools like that we actually do send students to, because that's going to meet their needs based on their IEPs. So that is basically individual students and the tuitions that we pay and the additional services they need for their educational needs. And on top of that, then obviously we transport those students to their placements. And that's where you see the transportation number.
Got it. Thank you. No, the breakdown in the detailed budget was helpful. I was just trying to understand all those different placements. So thank you very much.
Yeah. And we'll have numbers associated in within reason to give you a little idea. So I think your placement is 31 students is what is sort of sitting in the budget right now. And let me just clarify too, this is a point we talked about circuit breaker a little bit before. Your out-of-district budget is assuming that we are not going to get any circuit breaker. And so the $1 million that we got this year for last year's expenses, we didn't take that into account when we built your budget. And so that $1 million if we incur the expenses that we expect to expend, it goes against your operating budget. So when you look at the summary page, you'll notice that why does it look like our budget's so much higher than our previous year's actuals? And that's because circuit breaker is built into the actuals. And so that sort of, when you're talking $1 million, it's really easy to sort of see that play out.
Great, thanks. That's really helpful. And then the other high level question I had was using one of these lines as an example. Since 2020 and 2021 are going to be anomalous years, sort of as you're going through the budget. So a line here for substitute salaries. It's small, it's in relative nature, it's small, but in 2019, it was $64,000 and it's forecasted to be $45,000 for 22 and 23. Just, I guess, how are you looking at like 20 and 21 being such a strange year, and are you accounting for that?
Right. So the higher year is if we have a staff who go out for long-term medical stays, say maternity leave, or they may take a childbearing, start with us in October and then are out the rest of the year. The person who substitutes for them is in that line item. So that's why that one particular year is 64,000. But what you don't see is that, because that's your actual, right? Our budget was 45, the actual was 64. But what you don't see is their salary savings in the teacher's line item, because that teacher didn't stay on payroll during that time. So it sort of balances out. but
Yeah.
we have to capture it for state reporting purposes as though it's a substitute position. In our reporting now, we actually have to segregate out daily substitutes from long-term substitutes because the state wants to see that breakout. So in our financials here in the office, we have to code it whether or not it's just a daily substitute or a long-term substitute. So when you get big numbers like that, now I'll be able to show you that the reason why it was so high was probably because we had a couple of educators out on leave. If we looked at a normal year going back, Chickering typically, if we didn't have any long-term leaves, we're leaving substitute dollars left. So we never were over budget. So I feel like that the number that we have in there right now is still pretty healthy, knowing that we can overspend that if we have long-term substitutes coming in because of staffing.
Perfect. Thank you. Super helpful.
Other questions from committee members? I do want to raise the matter of EA staffing because it is a common refrain that we hear from parents regarding, concerns about my class doesn't seem to have a dedicated EA. And so I wonder if Dawn, you or Deb might sort of address how we go about determining what level of EA staffing is required and, which classes get them, and whether we think that we have enough right now, given the state of the world.
Yeah, that's something we can put together for you. In January, we've actually, if you look historically, we've had a couple of different methods of how we allocate educational assistance. And Deb, this goes back to, I remember theory, like Kirk Downing's years, we had a little bit larger class sizes, so we added more educational assistants as support. As we started pulling back from that a little bit over time, but we typically work with the administration, and it's not a formula, it's more of the cohort of the students. And so it may dictate that because the students in first grade, I know one year we had a kindergarten class that had a lot of students who had never gone to pre-K. And so that class, as it rolled up in first grade, I think that's where the school administration said we need more EAs in first grade because of the cohort. So I would refrain from saying there's a formula. I think it's basically comes down to the cohort, the number, the class sizes, and how they are going to be used. We're changing, I will say, you've heard a lot about the WIN interventions. We're changing, I think, how we're operating a little bit. So that could be a call for how do we use staff, and do we need more in order to be successful in the protocols that we're implementing.
Yeah, I definitely think this is an important area, and one that would be great to pencil in for some more detail in January. And related to that, given that we are seeing increased social and emotional needs of our students in the present environment, do we feel that there is adequate staffing support for that at the moment? Are our current SEL support staff overstretched? It seems that there are some grant funds that are dedicated to this area. So is this an area we should also be examining?
So I think where we've already made some additions is if you read your monthly, your this year's fiscal year 22 report, we have added a SEL specialist similar to the math and the literacy that's working across both buildings. We haven't built that into the budget yet because that's something it's brand new. We're still exploring it, but right now we have ESSER money to pay for that and potentially pay for that for one more year if we're still trying to play that out. Connected to that too, if you read based on the needs of students, we took your full allocation of your BCBA, which helps with SEL, behavioral issues, so that you are having a 1.0 versus a 0.7. And both elementaries did that in order to have more support in the buildings, and we backfilled it here at the region. That's been included in both elementary school to make that person a 1.0. So those are some additional supports that we've added in. And then I know Kate McCarthy and her group are continuing to see what other needs we have. And, if we need to add, we do have allocated money in our ESSER to cover that. As you recall, we said we don't really know everything yet, right? We're still only, 2.5 months into school. So I think we're trying to be methodical and not just throw people at situations, but understand and have a plan before we add the people. So we've allocated. The easiest way for us in our ESSER money is to say it's for educational assistance, but we can use that money however is best for each of the 4 individual schools. So I would hesitate to say that we ever don't do something because we say we don't have the money. So I hopefully the community realizes that based on what we've already added for fiscal year for 22 and what we've been that we feel good about, and we've already incorporated and are asking for those positions in fiscal year 23.
Thank you, Dawn. And Deb, I don't know if I don't want to put you on the spot, but I don't know if you have anything that you wanted to add, being our boots on the ground at
Sure.
Chickering regarding EAs and SEL staffing.
Right. It's not a straight formula, as Dawn said. It's complicated. We look at budgeting for general ed EAs and special education EAs, and some of that is dictated by IEPs for the special ed staffing. And then we look to cohorts, as Dawn said, and number of teachers across the grade so that teachers can plan for intervention groups. It's always nice to be able to say that if I'm the first grade teacher and Beth is my educational assistant, I want to be able to plan on having her there to help with book groups or to run that math group with me. But then if I have a substitute shortage and I need to have a substitute in second grade instead, we might scoop Beth to be the substitute in that grade, which is great for Beth and great for those kiddos, but now my class is back a little bit. So we're always balancing that need of where our educational assistants are and how do we need them throughout the building. We always say every day is exciting and you need to wear your sneakers and be flexible because every day is very different. So there's a lot of planning that goes into that. Of course, we're always going to say we need more EAs because it's a fabulous support. But I think we can find a balance for the need for the classrooms and the students and in the budget.
Do committee members have other comments or questions regarding the budget? There's one last.
I just want to add too, being new to the district, but being part of a process, and this during COVID time has been very different with budgeting. But one thing I will say is there has been time spent, just so the school committee members know, where we bring Deb and her team in, along with Kate McCarthy, our executive team at the central office, and really continue to have these discussions and trying to be very careful. But at the same time, I can't say enough about how appreciative as a superintendent it feels when you hear school committee members saying, we want to make sure that our kids have this SEL support or have those additional hands in classrooms so the teachers can do the heavy lifting with the support of EAs. So I do want you to know that we're meeting on a regular basis with every one of our teams across the district. And we're not finished planning. As Dawn said, this is a preliminary budget.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. And one last, perhaps budget related question. I received an email from a parent just this week inquiring whether our district has ever considered using bus tracking technology, which I gather is something that Boston Public Schools uses. My response to the parent was, I don't know, I will ask. And that I can imagine that there are, various pros and cons and associated costs with such a program. So I just wanted to raise it, see if it is something that's been considered and if it's something that we should consider.
So I will say every time we sit down and do our new 5-year contract, we sort of talk about it. We haven't found it to probably be a need here. to balance out the cost, and also it's administrative on our end as to, once the more information you give, the more questions that you may have. So trying to balance that. Just for reference purposes, I did reach out to Conley today to see how many districts that Conley service, which they really service all of our surrounding communities, participate. And he says very few. Although it sounds intriguing from a conceptual standpoint, once you get involved in it, he said it's a little bit of he didn't call it a nightmare, but it's not as simplistic as it seems. And I think if I understand based on some of the information he gave me today, it's not that you can just see where the bus is. You actually put like a range around your house, and when the bus is entering that or coming in, that's when you get a ding or a notification on the app that the bus is approaching. So it can be a little bit of, he said, of a technically challenging process to use. He does have a new application that he is going around and researching that other, not through Conley, but other districts are doing. So he said he might have some more information down the road. But at this point, I would say here, we didn't feel like there's a need for it. Our bus drivers are in constant contact with our dispatcher at Conley. And so we usually know immediately if there's something going on. And then we have a way to either through my administrative assistant here, get an email right out or information to those parents, or we rely on the administrative assistant sometimes at the elementary schools who know how to get a hold of people on a faster basis. So we feel like we have the protocols in place right now to provide parents any kind of information about the bus that would be sort of a safety concern. And I will say we're very fortunate, I'll just say during COVID, that all of our drivers came back this year. And I will say that is not the case in so many other districts. So we're very fortunate that our drivers do care about your kids. Some of them have been with us for a really long time. They know the roads. They're so great with that process. And we meet with them every August to sort of kick off. And one thing that I've been saying now for like 6 years is that you are the first encounter our students have for the day, and you can make a difference in how they walk through the front door. So know how important you are, and how you operate your bus and how you greet them is going to set them up for, how their day is going to go. And they do all take that very seriously. And I think we're very fortunate with that, in that we do have very caring drivers and who are good about letting us know if there's things going on, as Deb can tell you, but are willing to be collaborative partners with us too in handling things. So, that's just came to my mind, is just of how fortunate we are in the whole transportation arena.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Could not agree more. Colleen?
I was just wondering with the bus, some of the bus disruptions, has there been talk of having monitors, an extra adult on the buses? If there has seemed to be, has it risen to that level of need from your perspective?
So at one point, a bus monitor sounds like a great idea. At another point, the bus is such an opportunity for our children to practice doing the right thing when no one is looking. And sometimes it's a challenge, but I also believe that our students can manage themselves to ride the bus. It's also very hard to find bus monitors. So there's two parts to that.
I was going to say, yeah.
I knew you were going with that one. I jumped on you.
Bit of a moot point, I guess.
and sort of, we've had parents offer to be bus monitors, and I just can't think of a way to torture anyone more. I rode the bus a number of times in the years past, and gosh, there's never any problem when I'm there. So I'm quite sure that they know what they're doing. And that's usually pretty effective to help out as well. So we've played around with the idea, but I don't know that it would solve the problem we really want to solve. But thank you.
The school I work at, we have to have bus monitors, but the bus rides are also a lot longer at times because you're in the city. But it also can open up a whole other can of worms, especially if it's parents on other people's children's buses. It can be a challenge.
All right. So any other questions related to the budget? So Don, you need from us a vote tonight to approve this as a draft. Is that sort of the
Right, as your
language?
version, as your version 1.0 budget, knowing that you'll, I don't want people to get nervous there. That's all you're doing is approving version 1.0 so that we can submit it to the warrant committee by their requested date of December 10th.
Excellent. Well, is there a motion to approve the budget as presented this evening and as stated by Dawn?
Jeff Cassidy moved to approve.
Is there a second?
Colleen Burt, second.
Any discussion? All right, we'll take a vote by roll call. I see that unfortunately Mark has had to leave us, but we are still safe with quorum. So Colleen, let's start with you.
Colleen Burt, yes.
Jeff?
Jeff Cassidy, yes.
Liz?
Liz Grossman, yes.
And Sarah Gutierrez Dunn, yes. Thank you so much, John. We look forward to continuing to work on this, but I feel that we are in a really, really great place with a ton of work that you've already put in to put us in a great position to move forward.
Thank you. Thanks.
So next is our consent agenda, which consists of the Dover School Committee minutes from our October 26th, 2021 meeting. Do school committee members have any comments or revisions they would like to suggest to the minutes? I noticed two very small things. Well, I shouldn't say that because one of them is that our principal, Deb Reineman, was not listed on those present at the meeting. So we need to add her back in. And that is not a small thing because she is obviously a valued contributor. The other thing that I noticed on the minutes, they talked about let me just grab my paper here. Under item 10, which is the consent agenda of our September 28th and October 18th, 2021 minutes, it reflects that Mark Healy made a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended. I think the as amended piece is a remnant from a prior meeting because we didn't actually make any changes to either of those minutes. So I would suggest that if there's a motion to approve the consent agenda with the addition of Dr. Reineman as also present during the meeting and striking the words as amended in item 10 under the motion language. Is there such a motion?
Liz Grossman, so moved.
Second?
Colleen Burt, second.
Any discussion?
Thank you for catching those.
Sure, thanks. Colleen, I'll call on you first for the vote.
Colleen Burt, yes.
Jeff?
Jeff Cassidy, yeah. Yes.
Liz?
Liz Grossman, yes.
And Sarah Gutierrez Dunn, yes. Communications, you'll note for your information that we have minutes from the Dover-Sherburne Regional School Committee's October 12th meeting and the Sherburne School Committee's October 19th meeting. We also have a spreadsheet listing out the Dover School Committee assignments. And we have a few blanks that we do need to fill in. And I just wanted to also take a moment to thank Kathy and her team for spelling out a bit more about some of these roles and responsibilities. You'll notice that we've added in italics a description of the roles and responsibilities for each of these areas. So I think that I don't know if members have things that they are interested in sort of stepping in. I've highlighted in yellow the areas in the committees that need someone at the helm. So feel free to shout out if there's somebody who would like to step in on personnel or buildings and facilities. see, I think there's another page here. And if there are questions about what these, further questions about what these roles entail, we've got the source, here with us tonight to kind of guide us along from administration. Anyone dying to take on either of those roles? Or be the challenge success liaison? It's another piece.
Sarah.
Yes, Jeff.
Sorry, just a quick question on the buildings one. What is involved with that one, with the capital budget?
I can answer that. So Jeff, you would sort of probably, we do pre-meetings sometimes with the school committee rep when we're building the 5-year capital plan, keep you updated. And so it's with myself and our director of facilities. So it's just so that we can bring someone on the school committee down into a little more detail on the capital items. This year it's pretty easy because there's not a significant one. The floors are pretty straightforward, but we'd love to have someone join us now as we start talking about some of the projects that are coming up in the future years. So it's great to have someone who continues, who builds that knowledge, and then you're able to just give school committee a little bit more in-depth information from your perspective about some of the projects that we're proposing for Chickering. So it's like, probably 2-3 meetings. It's not heavy lifting.
Okay, thanks, Don. Sarah, I can volunteer for that position.
Thank you, Jeff. That's great.
Excellent. Thank you.
How about we need a liaison for challenge success, and maybe Kathy, you might speak to the communication task force, which I think had sort of been inactive, but it sounds like perhaps might become active again.
Yes, one of the areas that we're working on both with our leadership team, we've had a couple of meetings. We're talking about everything from looking at our website. You heard Assistant Superintendent Beth McCoy talk tonight about sharing some of those measures with the so-called district report card. We're talking about having some commonalities in our strategic planning and our communications home. So my understanding is Dr. Keogh had put together a couple of years ago, again, pre-COVID, where a member of the each of the school committees was able to advise him and share with to Dr. Keogh and now to myself, some of the things they would like to see in communication at a district and school level. So we are, just like I said, starting to review this. And I would very much like a member that, again, could work in an advisory capacity.
I
Just
don't.
a quick question. When does that meet? Like, is it yeah.
I don't have a defined time. So Liz, basically you're working during the day. So for you, something like that would work, after school. What time are you available?
Anytime after 2:30.
Yeah, I think Andrew usually held them at 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
To go past all the school schedules, and then anyone who outside from who could join in.
I'm happy to help with that if no one else is dying to do it.
That would be great, Liz.
That's for the communication. Is that for the communication? Great.
Yes.
Of course. Okay.
All right. And if folks, want to kind of let this marinate, but ask any questions they have regarding any of these roles tonight, that's fine. We just want to make sure now that we are full committee, once again, of 5 members, that we have each of these assignments decided on, so that should the need arise in any of these areas, we have a contact person ready to step in.
I'm happy to work as the challenge success liaison. I feel like I am a little over represented in these. So I don't know if someone wants to take over a different one, but I am definitely I'm on the buildings and facilities, but I'm not, attached to that. And
Well, it doesn't sound, Dawn, like you necessarily need two.
Oh, yeah, no, I was looking at that as not actually not having anyone assigned to it.
Oh.
So yeah, I think one is ample.
oh, okay, great.
Yeah,
If
so
if
I'm
doing
just-
that, yeah.
yeah,
I-
if Colleen, if you're okay with letting that one go,
Mhm.
I mean, Jeff's already signaled his interest in stepping in there, so
No, I
that'd be
think-
great.
I-
It's
yeah.
also lessen what's on your plate. I know you're very busy with the search committee right now as well, so.
Well, I'm very interested in challenge success, so I'm happy
Great.
there's an opening.
And I'm not sure we necessarily need a second person on personnel either. It's just that we had one in the past. So I think we're in a good spot here. Unless anyone has any other comments or questions. So the last item on our agenda before we adjourn, it would be just to call out any items for our January 18th, 2022 meeting. I think that we've talked already tonight about some of the budget pieces that we might like to discuss in a bit more detail. Are there other items that members would like to see placed on the agenda for January 18th? That seems a lifetime away.
I think it's obvious, but like hopefully we'll still be talking about our vaccination numbers and whatnot.
Exactly. Yeah, hopefully we'll still be grateful for in-person safe instruction for all. Well, on that note, unless there is any other business to attend to, I think we've reached the end of our agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Colleen Britt?
Second?
Second?
Discussion? All right, let's vote. Colleen?
Yes, Colleen Britt, yes.
Jeff?
Jeff Cassidy, yes.
Liz?
Liz Grossman, yes.
And Sarah Gutierrez done, yes. I want to wish all of you a very happy and very healthy Thanksgiving. Thank you for your time this evening.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
Everyone,
you.
happy
Happy
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.
Everyone.